When we think of crime thrillers, we often picture explosive action or shocking twists. But what if I told you one of the most powerful crime stories had no action scenes or gunshots until an hour into the film? This is Infernal Affairs, a 2002 Hong Kong crime drama that defied what came before, showing that true tension lies beneath the surface. And if you compare it to its American counterpart,
down right now!
there's shooting and violence within the first 5 minutes. Instead of external chaos, it's about internal battles, a continuous, never-ending struggle within both the characters and the city they live in. No wonder that after its release, it made waves not just in Hong Kong, but all around the globe. It was such a hit that 2 sequels followed the next year, and only 4 years later, Hollywood remade it as The Departed, directed by none other than Martin Scorsese. That version went on to win multiple awards, including Scorsese's first Oscar. But even though the story remains almost identical, the soul of Infernal Affairs was lost in translation. Scorsese's adaptation reflects a different culture, one obsessed with guilt, violence, and corruption. For the creators of the original, it was a bold statement, an attempt to revitalize and revolutionize the dying cinema of Hong Kong. Their goal was to break the bad habits of their predecessors and create something new. While in Hollywood, it was simply a great story adapted by a great director. The stakes were lower, and in a way, it was forced back into the very box Infernal Affairs had tried to break out of. But let's go back to the beginning. The idea came to Alan Mak, one of the directors, one day while he was watching Face Off, Hong Kong legend John Woo's third Hollywood venture. The concept of 2 people swapping identities and destinies got him thinking. While undercover cops in the Triad were a common trope in Hong Kong cinema at the time, having both a cop and the Triad member as moles simultaneously was a fresh idea. Mak knew a cinematographer from his early days as an assistant director, Andrew Leung, who had worked on projects such as Ringo Lam's City on Fire and the early films of Wong Kar-wai. Leung heard about his idea and asked him to write the full story, which became the start of their collaboration on Infernal Affairs. The script was completed with the help of Felix Chung, a frequent collaborator, and after 3 years they managed to find an investor. But making the film came with challenges. The Hong Kong film industry was in decline, so the creators knew they had to make something different to stand out. They took risks, most notably cutting out much of the action that defined similar films.
喂，還啱又要我寫多5分鐘打喎。
唔係，即係其實加多啲打呢幾個字咧，其實即係代表即係我冇意見咯。
But the crisis in the industry also proved to be helpful. As the number of films being made dropped, big stars were not only available, but eager for work. Once the team secured names like Tony Leung and Andy Lau, everyone wanted to be involved. Director and cinematographer Andrew Lau wanted the visuals to be as striking as possible, even asking Christopher Doyle to join the project as an advisor.
大家好多有色眼鏡睇我哋套戲嗰時個個覺得得唔得㗎？無間道。
In the end, even with all the risks, and an approach entirely different from both Hollywood and their Hong Kong peers, they created one of the most remarkable crime dramas of all time. One of the main things the creators wanted to avoid was relying on pointless action and shootouts. As I said before, the first gunshot in the movie happens around the 1 hour mark. And not only in the first film. The second and third ones also use action very economically. One of the pivotal scenes in Infernal Affairs is the transaction scene at the beginning. Here, the police and the Triad members face off without actually meeting until the very end. The deal takes place in a central location, while the police are surveilling the trade from a building across the street. We follow both sides simultaneously through parallel editing. On one side, Chen, the undercover cop in the Triad, is trying to feed information to his contact, Superintendent Wong, without being caught. On the other, Lau, the mole within the police, wants to update the Triad boss Sam about the police's movements. The suspense rises not only because we see the police closing in on the criminals, but because there are several other layers unfolding at the same time. There are separate battles within the rooms too, one between Chen and Sam, another between Lau and Wong, and ultimately, it's all about the rivalry between Wong and Sam. This scene, and the one that follows in the police station, not only sets up the major plot points showing the undercover characters in an extremely tense situation, but does so without relying on violence or heavy dialogue. The writing, performances, and editing work flawlessly together to establish the essence of the film. From this scene alone, we learn how the moles operate, as it introduces the Morse code that later becomes crucial for both Chan and Lau. It also shows the terrifying side of Sam, who can go from friendly businessman to vicious triad boss in a second. By placing the two sides so close to each other within the city, and showing how even after being caught they leave the police station calmly, the film highlights the reality of the power the triad held in Hong Kong. It also hints at a war that has been ongoing for decades, which is further developed and explained in the second film. The sequence lasts for about 15 minutes, from the moment the operation is set up until the triad members leave the police station. To make it clear how differently the same scene can be approached, let's compare it to The Departed. Instead of being part of the exposition and starting around the 20-minute mark, here it takes place about an hour into the movie and lasts only 8 minutes. The location is also different. The gangsters meet in a secluded area and are observed only through CCTV by the police. The use of Morse code as a form of communication is removed. Billy, the undercover cop played by Leonardo DiCaprio, now hides behind a pillar to send a text message instead. Sullivan, the mole played by Matt Damon, also uses standard text messages during the sequence to communicate with his boss Frank, played by Jack Nicholson. Another major difference is that here the police captain doesn't hide the fact that they have a mole inside.
Bias there.
Which already eliminates a large part of the suspense on the police side. This version introduces a new point of tension, by having the Irish crew and the Chinese gangsters threaten each other at the start of the scene. Finally, the criminals escape the docks.
They didn't figure we had a navy.
So the face-off between the captain and Frank happens later, in a public setting. It's clear that while this scene is essentially the same, the approach and the impact is much different. Scorsese places much less emphasis on this transaction, and the suspense that came from secrecy is largely removed. This shift in emphasis continues throughout The Departed. The addition of Sergeant Dignam not only brings more aggression and tension within the police, but also adds another person who knows about Billy's secret. While The Departed is based mainly on Infernal Affairs 1, and only bought the rights to that one, it also borrowed elements from the sequels and even real-life Boston crime stories like that of Whitey Bulger. Dignam, for example, can be seen as a variation of Superintendent Luke from the second movie, although Luke dies long before the events of the first film. This is significant because for Chan, the only person who knows his true identity is Wong. His death is therefore even more devastating, as it means there's now no one left who knows he's a cop. The Departed handles this by introducing a somewhat contrived fight that results in Dignam being suspended from the police.
Work with the tech guys to unlock those files. Dignam take a leave of absence.
Take a leave of what?
Another major change was the love interests of the characters. In Infernal Affairs, Lau has a stable marriage. Part of his facade is a perfect citizen and respected policeman. She's also one of the reasons he struggles with whether he should try to become a better man.
咁但係佢係好人，不過佢又做錯嘢喎，咁個結果應該點呢？
Chan, meanwhile, finds love in the only place he can truly be himself, safely removed from the eyes of the triad, in the therapy room of Dr. Lee, who serves as a mirror to his inner world and calms his turbulent mind, bringing balance to a life filled with ups and downs. The Departed instead creates a love triangle, in which the psychiatrist is romantically involved with both Billy and Sullivan. This idea comes from Infernal Affairs 3, where Dr. Lee helps Lau, although without any romance. And we also get to see more of her earlier relationship with Chan, emphasizing the blurred lines between their identities and the collapsing mind of Lau after Chan's death. The main characters also differ in tone. Sullivan, for example, is far more aggressive, which might fit their realistic portrayal of a corrupt Boston policeman, but it diminishes the contrast between the cop and the criminal. The characters of Frank and Sam are also written very differently. But one of the biggest changes is the addition of the FBI informant subplot. Both that and the inclusion of global conflict through the microprocessor trade raise the stakes.
I don't know what they are. You don't know what they are. Who gives a fuck?
Which should heighten the suspense. But these additions feel somewhat unnecessary when layered on top of an already compelling, if simple, premise. The Departed alters the rhythm of Infernal Affairs by condensing several of its pivotal moments, such as the transaction scene or the police captain's death, which becomes more visceral, realistic, and intense due to how it's shot and edited. In Infernal Affairs, time slows down as the focus shifts to Chan's reaction, accompanied by an emotional soundtrack and a brief flashback. The Departed, on the other hand, heightens the tension through quick cuts between the confused cops in the car and Sullivan listening to their updates from the office. But it also extends other scenes with more action and dialogue, like the confrontation in the cinema, where the chase scene happens in a crowded area, and there's even physical threat between the two characters. Or the added shootout before Frank's demise. It replaces the quiet, restrained moments of Infernal Affairs with something louder and more intense. If we look at the showdown between the mole and his boss in both versions, the difference becomes clear. In Infernal Affairs, Sam and Lau's encounter is brief. It all happens in about a minute. Sam calls him on the phone, Lau arrives, and then suddenly shoots him without exchanging a word. In The Departed, Frank calls first, they argue.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Frank shoots at Sullivan, and Sullivan shoots back and kills him. He then talks on the phone and shouts to the nearby policeman that he got Frank. Infernal Affairs builds up to this moment, so there's no need for additional dialogue. Lau set this whole operation up so he can kill Sam. But in The Departed, Sullivan confronts Frank about being an FBI informant, giving him a motive for turning on his boss. And by having Frank shoot first, the film provides him an even clearer justification for killing him. Where Infernal Affairs relies on subtlety and restraint, The Departed leans into crime genre conventions, where violence and extended dialogue are more common. The Departed amplifies the brutality and cynicism of Scorsese's crime world in a way that's distinctly his. But in doing so, it loses some of the restraint that gave Infernal Affairs its quiet intensity. Both versions reveal something about their respective societies, but they speak in entirely different languages. Infernal Affairs shows, while The Departed tells.
Well, you want me to say it? I'm not a cop, all right?
I'm not a fucking cop!
I'm not the fucking rat, okay?
It's not to say that one is better or worse, only that they are fundamentally different films. And it's fascinating to see how story-rich metaphors, historical context, and cultural nuance from Hong Kong is adapted in Hollywood into the framework of an Irish Catholic gangster story. To see what really sets the film apart, we need to look at its core ideas. The original Chinese title refers to the lowest level of the Buddhist underworld, Avicii, where an endless, continuous hell awaits the dead. This is the main metaphor of the films, the silent, never-ending suffering of the two main characters, who are trapped in lives they didn't choose. The intro takes us down this path to hell, and the different quotes that bookend all three films further emphasize this theme. It's also important that good and evil are not clearly defined. While we might take sides by the end, the characters themselves remain morally grey, their actions shaped by circumstance and perspective. Throughout the trilogy, we even see what led to each of their downfalls. In the second film, for example, we learn that Sam was once a loyal and selfless servant to his superiors and had a partner who meant a lot to him. Conversely, Wong, who we viewed as the pristine symbol of justice, was secretly scheming with criminals to serve his own goals, decisions that ultimately led both Lau and Chen into their own forms of continuous hell. Lau through the killing of Kwang, forced on Mary by Wong, and Chen through being made an undercover cop because of his family's ties to the Triad. He acts this way because he recognizes that the system itself is broken and corrupt, and he must find his own way to pursue justice, reflecting the realities of the times. In this hell, time is at a standstill, or rather it exists in an endless loop. The trilogy is filled with reminders of this. Take the watches. For Chen, they mark 10 years of service.
Go on!
For Lau, they are part of his luxurious facade. Then there's the therapist's alarm clock, which seems to stop time for Chen, letting him finally rest. And throughout the films, we see a constant tension between modern technology and traditional objects. Think of how well Lau uses technology to give him an advantage, while Chen prefers the old way, like the Morse code. Technology gets him into trouble, while traditional means can turn the table for him, like the file that reveals that Lau's a mole, or even save his identity, like the paper archives saved by his former boss. The cyclical nature of time is introduced in one of the first scenes, which takes place in a music shop, and the trilogy ends in the same place. A small detail most people miss: this receipt says November 28, 2002. Chan died the day before, on November 27, 2002, meaning the scene we see at the beginning represents the first day of his life in this continuous hell. The song they listen to in this scene, Forgotten Time by Tsai Chin, is a recurring motif throughout the trilogy. Its lyrics speak to the past, memory, and to identity. Hong Kong was under British rule from 1984 to 1997, and the trilogy unfolds during and just after this period. At the time, dual identity was a big issue. Even after Hong Kong officially returned to China, many did not consider themselves Chinese. This tension, this search for self in a place and time that makes it nearly impossible, is at the heart of Infernal Affairs. And just as time becomes fluid, so too do identities and reflections, a theme that runs through the entire trilogy. Infernal Affairs looks like it's reflected off a sheet of silver, as one New York Times review described its visuals. Andrew Lau loves to work with natural light, so he used the spaces Hong Kong offered, and the whole film feels like a reflection across the city's windows, a mirror that creates opposites in everything. Chen and Lau, Wong and Sam, up and down, light and dark, drama versus crime. As one review writes, the crime genre provides the film's rhythm, while the drama gives it its melody. These dualities extend to the main characters themselves. Chan is crime on the outside, but drama on the inside, while Lau is the opposite. The two men lead contrasting lives. Lau surrounds himself with symbols of success, like designer suits, a modern apartment, and projects an image of control. Chen, meanwhile, rejects these comforts. He owns almost nothing, drifts through temporary spaces, and even refuses to wear the watch Wong gives him. A small gesture that underscores his detachment from the world he's meant to protect. He only feels and acts like himself in liminal spaces, Dr. Lee's private room or the rooftop above the city. Verticality itself becomes a metaphor, representing the high and low of society. Lau strives to climb ever higher, seeking acceptance from those in power and attempting to walk in the light despite being a criminal.
你啲卧底真係得意，揀親都係天台嘅。
我唔似得你，我見得光。
Chen's journey, by contrast, leads downward, toward the underworld. A literal and metaphorical fall, an elevator ride from top to bottom. Infernal Affairs proved that deconstructing and reconstructing a beloved genre and defying a long tradition of movies can have a big impact. It shows that tightly written scripts, filled with metaphors, historical and cultural context, and deep character explorations can be just as exhilarating as any action movie. That world-class performances can tell a story even without words. And through its subtlety and simplicity, Infernal Affairs immortalized an image of Hong Kong in identity crisis at the turn of the millennium, a vision solidified in silver for eternity. In my eyes, it remains one of the most significant crime movies of all time, and a beautiful tale of destiny and the fear of losing one's identity. Stories of guilt, loyalty, and the search for identity can also be told with far fewer tools. Sometimes they unfold in quiet rooms or small restaurants through simple conversations. And few filmmakers capture that better than Hong Sang-soo. I recently watched the two-film collection of his early work, including Woman is the Future of Man and Tale of Cinema, streaming on Mubi right now, almost globally. Mubi is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the world. From iconic directors to emerging authors, there's always something new to discover. If you're looking for something less intense, something more reflective, I highly recommend Hong's films. His stories are filled with quiet dialogue, long takes, and characters caught in loops of love, sex, regret, and time. Hong's early works like these two are a perfect introduction to the minimalistic style he's carried throughout his career. If you'd like to check out this collection or explore Mubi's full library of handpicked films, you can try it free for 30 days at mubi.com/justonemorething. That's mubi.com/justonemorething for a whole month of great cinema for free.